Oh hey, I'm Mark, an art teacher
and professional artist.
And in today's weekly video, I'm going to show you how to color your drawings. It's a technique that you can use in any software that you have. Doesn't matter if it's Photoshop, Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, you name it, it'll work. It's a simple process that works great for, beginner and more advanced artists. That's what I use. It's also a particularly great workflow if you're learning. Let's see how it's done. Alright, so let's jump right into it. Here are the different steps that we'll be going over today. And so let me quickly go over those so that we have some sort of an idea of where we're going. But yeah, basically these 6 steps here can be recreated in any kind of software that you have. Right here I'm using Photoshop, but you could very well use anything you like. Today we're going to be using very simple tools that are available with the other alternatives. And so this is the sketch that we have here. This is what we'll be rendering today, or coloring I should say. And the very first step, well, there we go, we have it, we're done. Make sure you have your lines on their own layer. And well, here it works a little bit better if your lines are kind of clean. You don't need to be super clean because in this process, we're going to go over a lot of it with the shading. And so most of the lines are going to end up kind of disappearing. But at the same time, you don't want anything too sketchy because that's just going to make it a little bit harder to, to do the shading. And before I move on to the next steps here, before we apply the flat colors, I'll be referring to a lot of different tutorials that I've done recently in the past couple months for some of these different steps where I go into a little bit more detail because, well, this tutorial is really all about process, not so much how to do each of the individual steps. So with that said, let's apply our flat colors here. In this particular workflow, we'll add the colors right away because we want to have a clear direction for where we're going with this character ASAP. Not only that, but if you want it and if your lines are clean enough, this could be the end result. And that is kind of the logic with the 3 different groups here that we have. What I wanted to represent here is that after each of these sets of steps, you should have a drawing that you could call finished. A lot of the times I'll post a line art like this with simple flat colors on social media, and it's pretty common that I don't do anything further with it. But the way that we're setting ourselves up here is that we could technically keep pushing and keep pushing some more. And I really like this kind of workflow because unlike something like a speed paint, for example, where the first, I don't know, like 90% of the process is going to look like nothing, and only at the end it kind of comes together. Here we have many opportunities to just stop. And at many times throughout the process, we have something that looks pretty good, that looks like it could be finished. It could also depend on your style. Maybe you don't want to move on to the lights and to the polish pass. Maybe you're completely happy with what it looks like after you stop here. I don't want to give myself too much credit here, but this is really the workflow to rule them all. All right, anyways, back to the process here. So now I have all my flats all done, and I don't know why I had them in separate layers like this, but I'm just gonna flatten all of that. It's called flats for a reason. No, it's not technically the reason, but whatever. And yeah, like I said, we want to do this as soon as possible. And if I go over a little bit of what went into, creating this color palette here, I basically just went with a pretty typical complementary color palette. And once again, if you want to learn how to choose colors for your drawing, something like this, well, I have a video for that. So you can find the link to the tutorial in the top right corner of the screen here once again. So now we have a nice complementary color harmony and some warm and cool colors. We're ready to move on to the next step. Now, to tackle the shading, very simple. What we're going to do here, since we already have our flats layer, we're going to duplicate that, call it shading, and we're going to do a Control U or whatever the equivalent is in your painting software, and we're going to basically make that entire layer white and change its blending mode to multiply. Basically, we should go back to what we have before, except now we can paint some shading on top. And yeah, to make things a little bit easier, even we can log the layer so that when we draw, we don't draw outside of the boundaries of the character, of the silhouette. Yeah, once that's done, we're ready to start shading this thing. So we're not going to worry about anything else. All we want to focus on here are the values. So shade with black. Don't worry about using colors at this stage. I know a lot of people are going to probably typing already that their art teachers told them to never shade with black. Well, if that's all they said, they're not that great. And the thing with black is that it always depends. So in this particular workflow, not only is it set up to be easy to approach, regardless of the skill level that you have, it's also a process that's a little bit more based on real physics, based a little bit more on like a real 3D pipeline. So yes, we're using black here to shade. This is going to allow us to focus 100% on the values and nothing else. And by the way, if you haven't done so already, I highly recommend that you hide your flats layer for this, so that for every single step, we're not distracted by anything else, and we can dedicate 100% of our brain power to it. Now, of course, shading is complicated. It's not easy, but don't worry, I have another tutorial for that. Again, you'll find it in the top right corner of the screen. Basically, here what I was trying to do, and what I always try to do, is start big, start rough, and once I have something that kind of works at that level, it's usually a good indication that even if I move down to the smaller details, everything should still hold up pretty well. If the first step doesn't look good, you can bet that the rest won't either. So I'll start with the silhouette of the character, completely ignoring all the smaller details, and almost shade the character as if she was naked without anything on. Once that looks pretty good, then you can move on to the smaller details like the folds, the cracks, the holes, and yeah, basically whatever you got to do to make this look like a white 3D model. Disclaimer, this is one of the hardest steps of the process. So the lines, the shading, and the lights, those three are big ones. And I'm lucky in a sense because I've had a long career as a 3D artist. And so yeah, seeing these models in 3D like this with the shading on is all I've been seeing for the past X amount of years. So this comes a little bit easier, but yeah, if you're not really experienced with that kind of stuff, probably start with a drawing that's a little bit more simple. And whoa, I'm done. So the shading is pretty much done. Here, really quick, I decided to change the hairstyle because this one wasn't talking to me as much anymore. And I wanted something that has a little bit more movement. And already I was starting to think about the lighting step that comes after all of this towards the end, and I wanted to come up with something that's going to give me a little bit of a harder time. But yeah, anyways, at this step I am almost done with shading. We're not done quite yet though. I've done my big details, like my rough shading, and then I've gone into the smaller details, and now I still need to focus on the really small details. And that's about the time that I usually turn on my flats layer again. First, to see, well, how cool it looks or not. And with the colors on, it makes it a little bit more obvious also what every color represents, what kind of material it represents. And that's a usually good indication for shading, for the last steps of the shading. Depending on the material, maybe you'll want to go a little bit more, a little softer on the shading, maybe a little harder in some cases. So anyways, I like to end with this. And as you can see here in my layers tab, I've reorganized a little bit because I hate layers. No, that's not true. I take it back. I don't like when there's too many of them. And this process here is meant to be simple. So very, very quickly, we have the lines at the very top set to multiply. Directly underneath, we have our shading layer and then the flats layer. One thing I like to do is to add a little bit of inner shadow for my shading layer so that my edge is a little bit better defined. And again, just like the rest of the layer, I'm using black here, no colors. Also, create a new layer, call it Tint. And we're not going to do too much to that just yet. I'm just setting things up so that we're ready for the next step after I'm done with the shading. But the tint layer really is going to be what we use to introduce, like the redness maybe on the cheeks or the nose of the character, or on the fingers, and also some of the highlights. Anyways, we're not there yet, but to set this up, you want to use a 50% gray color, flat color. Once again, using the selection from our flat colors. And the reason we want it to be 50% gray is because we'll set the blending mode to hard light. In hard light, gray is invisible. Anything lighter than that will become brighter. Everything darker than that will become darker. Whoa. All right, just like the other layers, let's lock that one too. And let's keep going with the shading here. So like I said, we're going to be focusing on the smaller details at the stage. Everything looked pretty good from a distance, but yeah, if we zoom in here, we see that it's quite lacking. And one big thing that we have to keep in mind when working using this process is that we don't want to go too quick. Remember, after each set of 2 steps, we should have something that looks polished enough that it can be a finished drawing. So it's very important that we don't rush through all the steps. Take your time, do it well. So that's certainly what I tried here. So this is my final shaded character. I can mark one of these, making some good progress. And we can see I cleaned things up a lot more. And I also ended up merging my lines layer and my shading layers together. So now my shading is just one layer, no more lines. I mean, they're still there, but you know, now they're together. And well, it's starting to look pretty cool already. I wouldn't share that online though in this particular stage because, well, we don't have the tint and the reflections that I talked about. So let's go ahead and add that real quick. So as you can see here, it's very subtle, but it's what I was mentioning before. So a little red on the cheeks, the lipstick, and then we got some material information on the rest of the outfit, some very subtle highlights. All stuff that doesn't really matter when it comes to the lighting that we're going to tackle later. Now, you definitely don't want to go too heavy on this kind of stuff. As you can see here, it's very subtle what I have, and I wouldn't go any more than this. Basically, from a distance, it just has to look the same. So before, after, it looks pretty much the same. Nothing changes. We don't have any big changes in values here. All right, we're done with the next step, which completes another set of 2 steps. And yeah, now we just have a choice. Do we continue? Do we stop here? Of course, we're going to continue. On to the lights. And so, yep, new layer. Let's call it lights. And we're going to be setting up that layer as an overlay layer. At this stage, it's really cool because we don't have too much stuff. You know, we don't have that many layers on top of our flat layer. So it's a great time if you want to try and play with different variations of colors. Maybe find something that looks a little bit better. But in my case, not today. Now we need to set up for painting lights. And painting lights is not just a matter of slapping a new layer on top and just adding more to what we've done so far. We actually have to modify our flats layer here. So it's a great time to make a copy of everything that you've done so far. What I'm doing now is making a copy of my flat layer, but I'll end up making a copy of everything else as well in case my lighting pass doesn't turn out that good. So with the copy of the flats, what we're going to do here is darken it, because after all, we're going to be adding a light. So we can't have a drawing that's too bright already. We're going to darken it and tint it slightly blue as well. We're going to be painting a light with a light warm color, and so that's going to be a nice offset, having those cooler shadows with that warmer light. And now that I'm talking about lights, if you're not sure how to tackle this, well, I have another tutorial for that. Check it out in the top right corner of the screen here. Once again, this is the tutorial that keeps on giving. But yeah, with my colors slightly darker, tinted blue, and you can probably see also this is why you didn't want the tint layer to be too intense, right? Because the second that we change the brightness of the character, that tint layer can become a little bit overwhelming. Of course, you can always play with its opacity. But yeah, now we're going to be adding the first light. It's going to be a light from above, maybe a light from the sun. So here I'm finishing up adding the first light source, already starting to look a lot more striking. And in terms of the colors that I'm using to paint that light, it's going to depend on the colors of the flats. So, you know, overlay mode's not that great to paint light. It's the best that I found, but still not that great. So if you paint with a light yellow color over blue, for example, it's not going to give you the best color. So what I tend to do is just take the color of the flat, make it super bright, and then warm it up just a little bit. So overall, I'm using about 3 different colors here. Light yellow for everything that's kind of warmer already, white for when things are a little too dark, and light blue for, yeah, for pretty much the entire outfit. Next up, we're going to move on to the second light source, which is going to be the same process all over again, but from a different direction this time. I'm choosing a blue color, again, to offset the warm yellow color coming from the top of the scene. And you can probably see here, I kind of skipped over it, but I have 2 lights. I have light 1 and light 1 copy. Basically what I did is just duplicated the first light source because it wasn't quite bright enough for my taste. So yeah, of course you can do the same thing. That is the reason why they're all on their own layer, so that we can play around with their opacity, their intensity. Usually you'll want the main light source to be a little bit more intense and the bounce light to be much less intense. So then can cross out the next step and we're almost at the end here. So we have our 2 lights. Light number 1, the most intense of them all. And you can see here on my main light source, I also added an inner glow effect, which is very subtle, but it adds that little yellow tint in the transition between light and the shadows. So if you want to check out what it looks like in my settings, this is it. Inner glow set to hard light to, you know, about 50%. 32 pixels in my case. There we go. Without, with Especially look at the cape here, how nice that looks. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the final step, the polish stage. Let's wrap this up. Very quickly, all we're going to do here is select a soft brush, and going back to the tint layer, we're going to add, we're going to paint a little bit of a glow everywhere to make that light feel even brighter. And that's it. So very quick, and we can see with the tint on and off, and the richness that it adds to the colors. Very nice. I also usually use it for you know, like fine tuning. Like you can check here on the shoulder, like those highlights. It was a little bit too dark before, and I couldn't get the highlight bright enough with just overlay mode. So yeah, in the end, you can always fine tune things on this tint layer. Works really well. And then on top of all of that, I like to have an extra layer just set to normal, where we really just fine tune things at the very end, clean things up before we completely call it done. And so here's just a little bit, the things that were really bothering me, but I'm probably going to end up doing an entire pass on the whole character this way. But at this point, I can call the polish stage pretty much done. Oh, real quick here, this is my shading layer now. So as you can see here, I tinted a couple of things to help make my colors pop even more. And this is something that's super easy to do once you have your flats layer. All you got to do is select a region like this, like the skin, go back to your shading layer, and just Control B and tint it any way that you like. So this is something that I usually do as part of the polish at the very end if needed. Sometimes it works without. So in order, we have the line art, then the flat colors, then the shading, then we had a little bit of tint, first light source, secondary light source, a little bit of polish, maybe a background, and that's how you color your drawings. So as usual, I hope the tutorial was helpful, and I would be very, very happy if you tagged me either in your Instagram stories or in your tweets if you end up using this process here, and you definitely should. It's a very good process, if I dare say so myself, developed over years of practice. Also, if you want to grab my brushes for free, you can do so here, link in the top right corner of the screen and down in the description below. I certainly hope that you like the end result. I'm pretty happy with it. As usual, I'll be going through all the comments on the video, so if you have any suggestions for future video tutorials, do let me know. And while you're at it, smash that sub